us a story about farming. It is Donna Costley, and Donna and Merv are wonderful people, I can tell you that. We got to know them from riding the Razor. They're one of the couple from a lot of people here to go down to Mexico and help build houses, etc. They're just wonderful people. Remember, for this story, remember this one thing. If it wasn't for a farmer, you would be naked and hungry, and worst of all, sober. Donna Costley. Is not ready, so I'll tell another joke. Just a short knock-knock joke. You guys start on 3. 1, 2, 3. Who's there? Oh, you guys messed it up. No, you do that to your grandkids. You tell them you start. Here's Donna.
I wrote Mare's Tales a few years ago, and I should let you know up front that it has nothing to do with the hind end of a horse. Mare's Tales are actually a type of cloud we often see in Saskatchewan, especially in the spring. This story takes place in the spring and involves a farmer who is out seeding his crop. The farmer, I think, is a composite of my husband Mervyn, who has great respect for the history of our 4th generation farm, and also our son Chad, who flat out loves the land, the sky, and the critters. Mare's Tales. The morning sun is an orange yolk, sliding onto the pale blue sky like a free-range chicken egg slides onto an oiled skillet. Not that his mother would have called her chickens free-range. She just let them out on the tender spring grass as soon as the snow had melted to crusty tufts scattered across the yard. And the hens, feeling the freedom of unrestricted movement, after a winter of cramped heated housing, would dash around like kids dismissed at recess. After a long season of scratching an icy pen surface for crumbling bits of prepared feed and poultry kitchen scraps, the chickens would tear at the juicy new shoots with abandon and pay for it with green beaks, projectile poop, and orange yolked eggs. No one he knows keeps layers anymore or raises meat birds. He and Anne did both in their first years of marriage, in their first years on the farm. But as they took on more land and his folks made an early move to town, there just didn't seem to be the time. There's not much in the sky this morning for clouds, just wispy bits his dad called Mare's Tales, a sure sign of fair weather. But there's a hopeful dark blue band above the horizon to the north, and he says the small silent prayer he's been saying all spring for a bit of rain to get the crops growing. He's on the last piece and it isn't even the end of May. In a way, it's been good to have one long run of growing, of sowing, and he knows he's cursed the years he's been stopped for days on end by rain. But if he could choose now, he'd have to say that spending a wet day cleaning up the shop and doing a little fixing would be preferable to the worry over early seeded crops that lie in dry soil and don't get a chance to germinate. Still, this is his last day of seeding, and he's determined to enjoy it. He left the outfit at Morrison's homestead last night, so he parks his half-ton beside the tumble-down barn that shelters a pair of owls and a family of raccoons. The truck will be in the afternoon shade. He spends some time letting the tractor warm up while he checks the air drill and makes the rounds with his grease gun. He sinks with a whoosh into the air-ride seat in the glassed-in cab, settles his steel lunch kit on the sunflower-shelled floor, and checks the blinking green monitors. He feels that pulsing rush of adrenaline he suspects he shares only with cockpit pilots. Not that this is something he would say out loud, even to Anne. From his vantage point high above the field and the homestead, he watches for things he might see. He shrugs off endless suggestions from friends who tell him he could squeeze quite a few more bushels out of his land if he'd just spend a little time knocking down the old buildings and overgrown yard sites of the abandoned farms he now owns. He grins and nods and lets him think he's lazy. But the truth is, he really believes it's a small price, a few acres for a lot of entertainment. When he hauls grain to the Harper's yard in the fall, red-tailed hawks wheel and scream above the bins that are backed by 100-year-old poplars. They land on the dead branches that stick through the greenery and tell him, in no uncertain terms, to piss off. Who, he shouts up at them in mock rage, scares out multitudes of field mice from the stubble every spring? And who sits on front row fence posts waiting to sail in for an easy meal? Ungrateful birds, he hollers. At the Jessup place, just last week, he'd seen a doe lying flat in last year's dusty grass at the edge of the bud-ripe caraganas. Stretching her neck low, keeping her ears down, she was convinced she was camouflaged. In a little over a month, she will have dappled twins to contend with. How often has he heard a mama deer bark at her fawns out of hiding, playing tag in the open, not listening to a thing she has to say? Not much different than any kid on the planet, least of all his. They ended up just fine, though, with good educations and jobs in the city. Very rarely does he admit to the dull ache at the very bottom of his heart. Except for the weekly turns they take, coming home to help with the harvest, not one of the four of them is remotely interested in taking over the farm. As he pulls away from the homestead, he thinks about the folks that once lived there. He wonders if old Herman got a kick out of bouncing along on his metal seat, turning around to see the seagulls scoop in for earth-turned grubs. If Gertrude loved the round warmth of the brown eggs she pulled from the scratchy straw nests in the hen house. Morrisons, Harpers, Jessups, and 4 other names he lists, 7 families whose farms he now works. Some retired, some passed on, some left for greener pastures and steady incomes. He thinks of each of them as he rolls over their land, hopes he is doing them proud. The sun is almost overhead now, a bright blaze. The dark blue band to the north has disappeared. Only the mare's tails plume the sky. They are merely whispers of clouds, he knows, but he thinks they whisper that rain will come. Rain will surely come.